$307 trillion. That is the current number for global debt. It is a figure so large that the human brain cannot actually process it. Let me put it in perspective for you. If you were to spend $1 million every single day since the day Jesus was born, you wouldn't have spent even 1% of that pile. But here is the thing that should actually terrify you. It's not the size of the number. It's a secret that central bankers and politicians whisper in private rooms but will never say into a microphone. They have absolutely no intention of paying it back. Why? Not because they don't want to, but because, mathematically, they can't. We are living inside a financial system that is no longer designed to be balanced. It is designed to collapse. And when it does, there are only two ways out for your money, and neither of them is pleasant. There is a pattern in history-specific mathematical sequence that destroys empires. It happened to Rome. It happened to France. It happened to Weimar Germany. And right now, if you look at the charts, we are repeating it, step for step. To understand why we are approaching the end of the line, you don't need a PhD in economics. You just need to understand one simple, brutal concept, the mathematical tipping point. Imagine you have a credit card. You spend freely, living a life you can't quite afford. At the end of the month, the bill arrives. But instead of paying it with your salary, you open a second credit card to pay off the first one. You feel rich. You keep spending. A few months later, you open a third card to pay the interest on the second. For a while, on paper, you look successful. You drive a nice car. You live in a big house, but underneath, the math is rotting. You have entered what economists call a debt spiral. This is the point where your income is no longer used to buy things or invest in your future. Is entirely consumed just to service the interest on your past mistakes. This is exactly how the global economy is operating today. For decades, nations have borrowed prosperity from the future to pay for comfort in the present. We call it growth. But in reality, it is a legalized Ponzi scheme. And recently, something changed. As interest rates spiked, we hit the tipping point. The math has turned against us. History is littered with the corpses of nations that thought they could outrun this equation. Travel back with me to France in the 1780s. When we think of the French Revolution, we think of hungry peasants and Marie Antoinette saying, "Let them eat cake." But the real cause of the collapse wasn't just social anger. It was a balance sheet crisis. The French monarchy had spent the previous century fighting wars, including financing the American Revolution. They borrowed heavily to project power on the global stage. It worked until it didn't. By 1788, the debt was so massive that the interest payments alone were consuming half of the entire national budget. Think about that. For every tax dollar collected from a starving peasant, 50 cents went immediately to bankers just to keep the lights on. King Louis XVI tried to solve it the only way governments know how. He tried to tax his way out of it. But the economy was too weak to bear it. The system snapped. The result wasn't just a bankruptcy. It was the guillotine. The debt didn't just wipe out a ledger. It wiped out a civilization. Fast forward to 1923, in the Weimar Republic of Germany. A different century, but the exact same trap. Germany was crushed under massive war debts and reparations that they physically could not pay. They faced a choice. They could default, admit they were broke, and face a humiliating depression, or they could cheat. They chose to cheat. The government decided to print the money they owed. At first, it seemed like a magic trick. The bills were paid. The workers were employed. But then, the math caught up. The currency began to die. In early 1922, 160 German marks bought you an ounce of gold. By November 1923, you needed 87 trillion marks to buy that same ounce. We've all seen the photos of people pushing wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. But the tragedy wasn't the paper. It was the life savings of the middle class being vaporized in real time. A lifetime of hard work was reduced to zero, not because the money was stolen, but because the money became worthless. France chose default and revolution. Germany chose printing and hyperinflation. Two different empires, two different centuries, but they both ignored the same warning signs. And that brings us to the frightening part. We are making the exact same mistake right now. If you strip away the politics and the flags, every currency collapse follows the same four-stage pattern. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Stage 1 is what we call productive debt. This is the healthy phase. A nation borrows money to build roads, factories, and schools. The debt creates growth, and the income generated pays off the loan. This was America in the 1950s. Then comes stage 2, financial overreach. The growth slows down, but the spending doesn't. Governments start borrowing not to build, but to maintain. They borrow to fund entitlements, defense, and bureaucracy. The debt starts growing faster than the economy. Then, we hit stage 3, the Ponzi phase. This is the turning point. This is when the government has to borrow new money just to pay the interest on the old money. No value is being created. It is purely a shell game to keep the illusion alive. Finally, stage 4, currency debasement. The investors wake up. They realize the government can never pay them back in real value. They stop buying the debt. So, the central bank steps in and prints money to buy the government's own debt. This is the death spiral. The more they print, the less the money is worth. The less it's worth, the more they have to print. Look at the world around you today. Where do you think we are? We are not in stage 1. We are certainly not in stage 2. Ladies and gentlemen, we are deep into stage 3, and we are knocking on the door of stage 4. Let's look at the numbers for the United States, the anchor of the global financial system. The U.S. national debt has exploded past $34 trillion. But the debt itself isn't the scariest metric, kids, the cost to carry it. Because interest rates rose to fight inflation, the cost of servicing that debt has skyrocketed. As of this year, the United States government is spending more on interest payments than it spends on its entire defense budget. Let that sink in. The world's greatest military superpower is now paying more to its bondholders than it is to its soldiers, sailors, and pilots combined. It is a mathematical straitjacket, and it's not just America. Japan, the United Kingdom, the Eurozone, they are all trapped in the same room. They cannot raise taxes enough to fix it, because the economy would crash. They cannot cut spending enough to fix it, because the voters would revolt. So, what happens next? When the math makes payment impossible, reality has to bend. There are only 2 doors out of this room. There is no third door. Door number 1 is a hard default. This is where the government simply walks up to the podium and says, "We're sorry, we cannot pay." They stop the checks. The result would be immediate catastrophe. The banking system, which holds all this government debt as safe assets, would implode overnight. ATMs would stop working. Supply chains would freeze. It would be a deflationary depression that makes the 1930s look like a picnic. Because that option is so painful and so politically suicidal, no government in history chooses it willingly. Which leaves us with door number 2. Door number 2 is a soft default. This is the path of least resistance. It is the path of Germany in 1923. The government doesn't say they won't pay. They promise to pay you back every single cent. But they will pay you back in currency that they have printed out of thin air. They will sacrifice the value of the currency to save the bond market. Technically, they didn't default. You got your money back. But that money will buy you half as much gas, half as much food, and half as much housing as it did before. It is a stealth tax. They aren't taking money out of your bank account. They are sucking the purchasing power out of the money while it sits there. This is why the stock market keeps hitting all-time highs even when the economy feels terrible. It's not that companies are becoming infinitely more valuable. It's that the dollar measuring them is becoming worth less. We are witnessing the devaluation of your labor in real time. When empires fall, it is never a slow, linear process. It is like ice cracking on a frozen lake. It holds and holds and holds, until suddenly it doesn't. We are standing on that ice. The fractures are visible. The debt to GDP ratios, the deficit spending, the money printing, these are the sounds of the ice groaning under the weight. The question you need to ask yourself is not, will they fix it? The math says they can't. The question is, where will you be standing when the ice breaks? Will you be holding the paper currency that they are printing into oblivion? Or will you be holding real assets, things that cannot be printed? Things that hold value regardless of what the politicians decide a dollar is worth. History does not repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes. And right now, the rhythm is getting faster. The debt spiral is spinning, and the centrifugal force is about to throw the unprepared off the edge. This is the greatest wealth transfer in history. It is moving from those who save in currency to those who invest in reality. Don't get left on the wrong side of the equation. If you want to understand how to navigate this shift and see the economic truths they show you on the evening news, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. I'm Economy Rewind. The numbers don't lie, even if the politicians do. I'll see you in the next one.